Welcome to Mental Health Mondays. We are so happy to have you with us this evening. We look forward to each and every week joining with all of you and being able to share information about mental health that will help you personally, your family, those who watch the program. And today we are going to be talking about grief. And we have all on some level and aspect have dealt with grief and had to grieve either the passing of a dear loved one. But as I said last week, grief doesn't always have to deal with the passing of a special person in your life. It can be anything from a relationship, all different kind of things that you have lost that are close to you, and you grieve the loss of that thing. That's also a grieving experience as well. So we are going to be talking about grief, and I'm just happy to have my co-host here with me, Dr. Ricardo Whyte. Always fun to do the program with you. We want to go ahead.
Greetings, Atonte. Yes, it's good to be on the program with you again, sis.
Yes, I see that we already have some in the chat that are telling us where they're from. Michelle Myers from Canada. If you can tell, we spell our name the same. That's because it's my husband's cousin. It's my cousin.
Oh, nice, nice. Okay.
So welcome, Michelle. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I think Michelle, is this your first time viewing? You could put a 1 in the chat if it is. But we also have someone from, two. Well, I saw two this is from Sacramento, California. And so that's not too far where we just moved from. And I thought I saw San Jose. That must have been further up. That's definitely where we just moved from. So we have a lot of California love tonight. But please put in the chat where you're watching from. That's always exciting to see. And this is, we take your questions. So if you have questions about our topic, grief, please put it in the chat because we would like to try to see if we can answer that question for you. And also, this is a good time to share on your social media that Mental Health Mondays is on, and we're talking about grief. Invite people to join us now. So if you would be so kind to do that, and even like this on whatever social media platform you are watching, if you can push like or love, even that would be great because that helps us to get the word out. Because New Zealand, exciting! Welcome, Richard from New Zealand. Liz from Florida. I think Yvonne from Atlanta. All right, welcome, welcome. David Hutchinson from New Jersey. Nice to see you here. So yes, we are happy to see that's Canada, the Canadian flag. All right, Gregory, welcome. So yes, we are happy that everyone is here, and we are ready to begin this discussion.
Absolutely. What an amazing opportunity for us to have this discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Before we even talk about some of the various types of grief,
Mm-hmm.
I think probably the most dangerous grief is the grief that you don't even take the time to notice.
Right.
Our society is so fast paced today that we can be tempted not to slow things down long enough to be aware of what is grieving us.
Right.
And that truly can be a tragedy because when
Very
you're
true.
not aware of it, now you're vulnerable to it hijacking you and it coming out in ways and in forms that might be counterproductive. So please be aware that just because you choose not to acknowledge it, it doesn't mean that you can't be affected by it, especially to the point where it can actually hijack your behavior so that you do things that don't serve you in the long or in sometimes or in the short term.
Yeah, it's so many times our grief, even when we do know that something traumatic has happened or has made us sad, we don't take the time to grieve. We just try to shove it under and just keep moving forward and never really dealing with it. And it will come back it will have an effect on you at some point. It's not going to just go away. You have to go through that grieving process. It's healthy. It's actually healthy to go through the grieving process.
And it's not always your fault that
Right.
you're not taking the time, because it can
Mhm.
often feel like life is not giving you the time.
That's very
Um,
true. That's very
because
true.
loss does not occur at your convenience. It doesn't
Right.
consult you. Hey, is next week a good time? I'll be back, and we'll negotiate a good time. No, it drops, and
Mhm.
often at periods where it is incredibly inconvenient, so
Mhm.
that it's then where you have to take that ingenuity to figure out, okay, well, how do I go through my process? How do I give myself the resources that I need? And
Mhm.
you can see why getting that independent counsel can be so critical, because
Right.
when you're so close to the situation, it can be very difficult to get a perspective that
Right.
supports healing and allows you to function optimally.
That's right. That's right. I was gonna, and I have to use my glasses now. I'm getting to that point so that I can read. But I wanted to talk about um, the 5 stages of grief
Yeah.
from
So
Elizabeth
the five
Kubler-Ross.
stages of grief were founded.
By
It's often accredited to Elizabeth
Elizabeth Kubler-Ross.
Kubler-Ross. Were you
Yes.
going to talk a little bit about her?
Well, no, I wasn't going to
Okay,
talk about her.
I'll
I was
talk
just
about
saying
her a
her
little.
name, but you can if you
Yeah,
want. If you want to give a little history.
she's a Swiss psychiatrist with a very,
Mhm.
very interesting background, and it's worth looking her up and learning about her in her early life. Her father wanted
Mhm.
her to be a secretary, and so she resisted that. She actually left home at 16 and charted a course.
Mm.
And through a series of life events, she became acquainted with this issue of death and dying. She visited
Right.
one of the concentration camps, and she was struck by a image of butterflies. And
Mm.
she then went on to become a psychiatrist and practiced in the United States. And her education history is just profound, but really introducing the field to the idea that there can be dignity in dying,
Right.
and that as healthcare practitioners, we can be agents in facilitating that dignity. So maybe you could talk to us about these stages of grief. Over to you.
Yeah, well, I learned them in school as we call it DABDA, but that's just so you can learn well, anyways. But DABDA stands for the D stands for denial. Um, and denial is just when when something passes, you're just like in disbelief. You just can't believe that they're gone.
And it's so
Um,
natural because you're like, no.
Right. Yeah, it
It's-
couldn't yeah, it just couldn't be. So, you just can't believe that, they were just here and now they're gone. So the first stage of grief is denial. And so you go through that process. The next stage is anger. And you can be upset. Like you're upset that they're gone. You can be upset with God. If you believe in God, you can just be upset with life, that it does this, that it takes people, it robs people that we love and care about. You're just angry. And the next phase is bargaining. And it could be like, why God, why not me? Just being in that bargaining type of mindset, and that's not going to bring the person back, but you're in the mindset like, you know is there anything I can do to bring them back? Or I'll do this, or, just you're just grieving and you're going through that phase. And the one that just really sits with us probably for the longest is depression, just being sad, that they're gone. And finally, you get to acceptance. All of these um, phases, it doesn't go in like the order I just said. It doesn't have to go in the order that I just said. It can be out of order. There's really, it's not, a pure scientific thing that this is how you don't grieve in this order, but you do go through these different phases within your grief, whether they're in that order or not.
Right. And I'm sure you weren't talking about clinical depression, because clinical depression is not necessarily inherently part of the stages of grief. I mean, so you
Right.
were just talking about
No,
sadness.
just sadness,
Yeah,
the deep
sadness
sadness.
and feeling down.
Hmm.
Um, but
Hmm.
yeah, it's one of the questions in the chat from Gregory is how to deal with someone that is grieving. And part of dealing or helping a person is respecting the fact that these stages can take different sequences. It can be very unique. And
Yeah.
part of helping a person or dealing with a person, as he put it,
Right.
is respecting the person's progress,
Mhm.
through the various stages. Now, of course, it's impossible for us to answer that question in not knowing what he means by dealing with the person. Are they a coworker? Are they a family member?
Right.
Are they, because all of those are going to require different facets. And then there's even, is it grief, because it's
Mhm.
kind of a mental health practitioner that would be able to tell you, is this normal or is
Right.
this abnormal?
Right.
So that's a little complicated. So one of the big things is the duration of time that the
Right.
grief is lasting. That may dictate one way or the other. But I'm just emphasizing it really is situation by situation.
Mhm.
One of the big things is listening. One of the
Right.
big things is the ability to listen and not feel like you have to have the right words,
Mhm.
and actually acknowledging at times that you don't have the right words.
Right.
I don't even have the words for this situation. Um, Understanding the power of silence, and the role that it can play in communicating to the person that this is an overwhelming situation, and I get
Mhm.
that. And I don't feel
Mhm.
like I have the right words per se. What were you going to say, sis?
Well, two things. I was just going to going off what you're saying, with that question, how do you deal with someone and really just sitting with them and having empathy, for them and just listening, like you said, having that empathy, and just being there for them because, depending on what stage they're in and how long it's been, it's just, it's a very delicate situation. So just, you know, showing them love and having that empathetic ear is what I would say to someone who, just wants to know how do I be there for them.
Right. Look at this question. Is there a different way that a Christian should deal with grief as opposed to a person of the world, or is there no difference? Um, I would say whether you're a Christian or you're a person of the world, I'm
Hmm.
thinking your objective would be to be loving,
Right.
as is dictated by the situation, as is appropriate in the situation. And one of the loving things is also to connect them to the resources that will help them, if that's appropriate.
Right.
So
And were
my
they asking like as a person to support the person grieving or the person grieving? Is it, and I'm not sure. Are they asking, is there a different way a Christian grieves versus someone else?
I
I'm
think
not
maybe they're saying how a Christian should grieve versus how someone in the world should grieve. Okay, thank you
right.
for that distinction.
Yeah,
Um,
I would well go. I mean, I was just wanted
After
to
you.
say really
Yeah.
I don't really see a difference except the Christian knows how to pray to God, right? And to cry out to God. And maybe the person in the world doesn't have that relationship with God to know to cry out to God and know to come to ask God to help them, to comfort them. And so because pain is we're all human, pain is pain.
Yeah, this
Right.
question is reminding me of a text in scripture. Maybe it was Paul. We don't grieve as the world.
Mm.
Something as that. It's reminding me of that text, and I don't know if that's what it's alluding to. That
I,
said, that said,
okay.
you'll want to remember that our goal is outreach to a broad community. That's our goal. Our goal is to edify the broader community so that you can understand how someone, let's say, quote unquote, in the world.
I agree with Caroline. Sorry. She said that a Christian has hope. Yes, a Christian has hope, Caroline. I just want to say yes to that, but go ahead.
Right. So you can understand how someone in the world would hear that text, we don't grieve as the world. So, and keep in mind that person might be sad right now.
Mhm.
So what I'm teaching right now is Christianity 101.
Mhm.
Right now we're talking about grief. hopefully people have tuned in who might be even grieving.
Mhm.
There might even be people in the world who are
Mhm.
tuning in who are grieving. So
Mhm.
they're in a vulnerable position.
Mhm.
So how would I answer that question? The question would be that whatever resources that person came to the situation with, I would be
Mhm.
trying to utilize those resources to
Mhm.
help them experience some healing.
Mhm.
Whatever they came with, whatever they
Right.
came with. The
Yeah.
good news in patient care and working with a client is people come in with something
Right.
that you can use,
Right.
something that you can stitch to hope, and I would be leveraging that thing.
Mhm.
And everyone's coming with something different. That's
Mhm.
how I would answer that.
Yeah, and I guess I was in it to go back to that point too about if Christians, if we all grieve differently. Yes, I agree with what Caroline said. We have hope. We know how to pray to God. He gives us comfort. and and I think the Holy Spirit does that even if people don't know God, meaning like without the Holy Spirit, even when they don't know him, they don't know that's who's giving them comfort, but I believe that the Holy Spirit will comforts those in the world as well. And they don't know God personally, but God is just a good God. He is able to be there for his children who don't know him yet. And I was just going to say, like, transparency here, like many people know, maybe a lot of people who are watching don't know, like I lost my father last year February, and then like 2 months later I lost my grandfather, and then a couple of years.
Sincerest condolences to you, sis.
Yes, no, yes, and this is, thank you, but I'm just saying that to say, like, I know God in a personal way, and I know what the Bible says, like what happens to us, like, what happens when people die, and like I have a good understanding of that. And I just, my pain was still very much so there. I was just, like people have said, I was able to cry out to God and pray to him, and he was able to bring comfort. So in the sense, do, Christians versus people who are just in the world, do we grieve differently? I mean, the pain is still the pain. I guess I want to say the loss is still the loss. And I just don't want Christians to go away and think like, if I'm a Christian, I shouldn't be grieving this bad. Like, I just don't want them to walk away with like thinking it's because it's okay to grieve. It's okay to hurt and to cry and to, need to talk to a grief therapist, or, just to talk to a loved one and say, hey, I'm still hurting. That's part of the grief process. Because sometimes I think Christians might walk away thinking like, I'm a Christian, so I don't have, I'm supposed to be okay. Even though it's sad, I'm supposed to be okay. And eventually you will be okay, but we're still human and we grieve the loss as well. Go ahead.
Well, thank you for that sentiment and like addressing that nuance that, yeah, as Christians, we need to have the permission to grieve.
Yeah.
Um, the reality is, and this is critical, we were not made for loss.
Yes.
That's not why God made us, you
Mm-mm.
know. In fact, you'll remember in Genesis chapter 2 where God remarks, "It is not good for man to be alone."
Right.
Okay? It is not good. It's being in a state of connectedness is actually an important part of the human experience.
Mm-hmm.
And loss can oftentimes be traumatic, and that was not God's design. It wasn't his goal that we be experiencing loss. So
Right.
why will we hurt? We'll hurt because we weren't made for that. Now,
Mm-hmm.
here's the question: why does someone grieve for years? Now, again, if there is severe disability to function, so if it's severe and if it's protracted, it's really worth getting a mental health evaluation,
Mm-hmm.
because that may very well be beyond just grief and be moving towards a psychiatric
Right.
disorder, including whether it's a mood disorder or some other psychiatric issue, and it needs to be worked up.
Right.
Because grief is usually, we talk about 6 to 9 months or something like that, and beyond that, we start thinking that, hey, there might be something else going on clinically.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and of course, you may feel sadness. It might be 20 years later, and you feel some sadness,
Oh
but
yeah.
it's not crippling,
Right.
devastating,
Right.
sadness that impairs your ability to function as a human.
Mhm.
So that really is the difference. But yeah, we were not made for loss, and so that's an important thing
Mhm.
to understand. What were you going to
Yeah.
say, sis?
No, I was kind of looking at there's a lot of things going on in the chat, so I didn't want to miss them, but I guess I'll wait for Amber to put them in. But some of the tips, like some of the grief things that I do with some of my clients that are grieving, just letting them, really know that, it's okay. One thing is to help them to open up, either, of course, to me as their therapist or to a close family member and friends, like not to shut off, just to let, you can express to your family or to your friends or those who are, care about you that, I'm not doing okay. I'm really, I'm still really hurting. Just letting people know how you feel and allowing them to, sometimes we don't want people to feel sorry for us or to pity us, but it's okay for people to hurt for you because you're hurting. And it's okay for them to hurt for you because when they're going through something, you can hurt for them as well. But it's just opening up, and not just trying to, close everything off and not let people in. Just let them know, people who really care for you, let them know that, you are hurting. Just they know where you're at, just to, just be open with it and not feel like you have to be so strong and not show that you're actually still hurting and grieving in the way that you are.
And this is where sometimes you can get a little support to help you decide what is opening up too much versus what's not opening up enough,
Right.
because you have to do it with wisdom. I just
Mhm.
want to backtrack to the question about grieving and in the world,
Mm.
because it's interesting, sis. I don't know what it means when they say is in the world. Christian
Right.
versus the person is in the world. And let me just deal with that really quickly, because the wise men that in scripture actually knew that Jesus was being born, they were quote unquote in the world.
Mhm.
They weren't Christians, and they couldn't have been Christians because their whatever predates Jesus being born. And yet
Mhm.
they were that attuned with writing and scholarship to where these wise men were ahead of even the Jews in recognizing that Christ was born. And you'll
Mhm.
remember the statement, I believe, was it to Elijah? I forget what prophet it was to, where God was like, I have 7,000 that are not of this fold.
Yeah, it was to
Um,
Elijah.
yeah, it's like, I have children that are not of this fold. So I don't
Mhm.
know what it means in the world. I
Right.
think the statement could fail to recognize the sophistication of our worldly counterparts and what
Mhm.
tools that might be available to them to grieve.
Mhm.
So, Christian versus the world, it's a more complicated question than we might first let on, especially
Right.
as you read in Scripture, where on numerous occasions you saw people who were in the antagonist position, whether it's the centurion or
Mhm.
the Good Samaritan or the Syrophoenician woman, these people who were in the world, but they showed a level of theological sophistication that superseded
Mhm.
that of the followers. Um,
Mhm.
so I just want to highlight the complicated nature of that question.
Mhm.
Over
What
to you,
does
Sue.
Well, I was saying, why does someone's asking a question? Why does someone grieve for years, ultimately changing their whole life?
Well,
And I guess
that's what I was dealing with when I mentioned that we weren't made for loss. Like
right.
that's why it's so
Okay.
severe. But over to
Okay.
you. Over to you.
No, that's fine. Okay. If you feel like we already covered that, that's fine. Yeah, we weren't made for loss, but I was also gonna say, like, it depends on what level of, because I feel like I will always be grieving my dad, but it's not stopping me from functioning. But I will always
Exactly.
grieve his loss until the
Exactly.
day I die. So, I
Mhm.
mean, I'm just gonna, say that I just think
Exactly.
that the sadness and the fact that we miss them will always be there, but it won't affect my life in a negative way. Um, what happens if you just stuff it? Nothing good happens if you just stuff it. And that's
Well,
not really a clinical. That's not a clinical answer, but stuffing it is not the answer. Go ahead. I'll let you tackle that, Dr. Whyte.
well, it's interesting, and it's just the complicated nature of these questions. So let's say you're in crisis. If you're dealing with grief and you're in crisis, you may need to stuff it for a little bit. Take, for example, the battlefield where you're dealing with loss. I assure you, in order to function in a military context, you have to do quite a bit of stuffing it, especially if it's an emergency
Right,
situation.
right.
Healthcare, when you're in acute, desperate situations, yet again, and this is not exactly the period that you're like asked to really unpack and deal with the grief. It
Right.
is compartmentalized. It's compartmentalized where so that you can continue to function through the crisis, so that you can minimize loss, because
Right.
part of the reason why you're continuing to function is damage control, is so that all is not lost.
Mhm.
What we're encouraging though is we're saying there might be a period for stuffing it, but there's also a period for dealing with it.
Right.
Now, why? Why is that? Because when you do not deal with these mental health issues, it positions you to get hijacked. It
Yes.
can you can respond to things in ways where you're shocked because the thing that's instigating your response or precipitating your response is not is much smaller than your actual response. So
Mhm.
the stimulus may be at a 3, but you respond at a 10 out of 10 severity, suggesting that there was more to that than just that little stimulus. And that's what, when we stuff our emotions, that can be the consequence. It comes out in other ways.
Mhm.
Our body, both our psychological mind and our physical, body, are very linked, and there's a field called psychoneuroimmunology that highlights that this is beyond just, acute statement. No, we're very, very intertwined, and a psychological impact can have a physical manifestation. And the goal is to process things in a way where it doesn't hijack you and you deliver a response that is more damaging to your overall life agenda.
Yes. There's one up there. I don't know if the friend is having a current panic attack or if she's had a panic attack in front of you.
Yeah, my friend's having panic attacks. Okay, so you know, we always want to remember when it's important to get emergent info, attention, whether it's
Mhm.
911 or your crisis hotline or what
Right,
have you. So obviously, we don't know the situation, so
right.
you'll have to make that determination as to what's really needed. Um, and so, yeah, it's like we can't really make recommendations given that we don't know the acute nature of the situation that you're facing. Um, but yeah, standard for panic attacks is there's medication, there's psychological interventions, there's um, that often involves a treatment plan that takes into account a diversity of areas of a person's life in
Right.
order to address it.
Yeah, and I think she was saying that, or that person was saying, I don't know if it was a he or she, but that the panic attack was because of grief and depression. That's what their assessment was. But um,
Well,
yeah,
just to be clear about, let's say, for example, panic disorder.
right,
Usually, with panic disorder, the thing that's precipitating the panic attack and panic disorder is actually unclear. Um,
right.
but as far as a panic attack, there are many things that can cause a panic attack.
Hmm.
So that's true. But the key is getting that person the mental health support or the health support that they need. Obviously, we can't speak on it because we don't know what exactly is
Right,
going
right.
on. But
There was. Oh,
Yeah,
go
go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was in that question that was right after this one. How do you know when what happens when grief turns into sin?
What happens when grief turns into sin? Gregory, it'd be nice if you gave an example of that
Yeah,
so
because
that
I'm not
yeah, so that
sure.
we can make sure that we're not telling you what we're thinking and it
Right.
doesn't jive with what you're thinking. So maybe
Yeah,
you can
I
give an
need some
example of
clarity on that one.
when grief turns to sin.
Yeah.
Do some people hold on to grief? Wow, still dealing with the loss of my husband. When I'm with his family after the visit, I can sleep up for day after. Why?
Mm.
I can't. There's probably a T missing on the can. I can't sleep
Can't sleep up for a day
for
after.
for
Why? Or
day after day. Why? Okay.
alcohol,
Well,
drugs. Okay. Okay, after
well,
that one, Gregory gave clarification, so we can go back to that.
oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah,
There
can't.
we go.
Can't was
Okay.
what they can't sleep. You're right. It was a T missing.
Yeah. So what's interesting is still dealing with the loss of
Yeah.
my husband. What is the dealing? Um, and by that I mean, what are the methods? What is the intention that you have put into addressing how you're coping with the loss?
Right.
And what I mean by that is that requires intention. That requires
Mhm.
intention.
Mhm.
Is it psychotherapy? Is it psychiatric support? Is it a grief group? Is it
Mhm.
personal journaling? Is it personal contemplating and meditating?
Right.
What does the loss mean to you? Like, what is the process? Because what
Right.
you find with trauma, um, tr- part of trauma is just the sheer bewilderment, just
Mhm.
not understanding, just the
Right.
multitude of questions that emerge in the explosion of a trauma.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
part of the trauma. So that
Mhm.
as you work through those questions and as you start to understand the significance and as you start to understand, okay, well, this is what's going on, it can be such an important part of healing is getting those questions answered. But a
Mhm.
lot of times, sufficient intention
Right.
may, and I'm not saying it's in this situation, Tyra, you may have done all the things that I'm talking about, but this just allows us to have the discussion.
Mhm.
It deserves intention of how we take the time to answer the questions that
Mhm.
occur from the grief. Over to you, sis. What were you gonna
Well, I
say?
was gonna say, and Tyra, I think she's the one that asked that question, right? I don't know if you have been a part of a grief support group, because that can be very helpful. The one that I recommend to my clients, and I personally know that it benefits. My mom went through the process when my stepfather passed away in 2018. It was very beneficial to her. They were, married for 17 years, extremely close and in love, and we lost him within it was a little bit less than 2 months, like from diagnosis to death. And so it was very traumatizing. But she attended Grief Share. And I don't know if Dr. Wright, if you're familiar with Grief Share, like you can go to griefshare.org. They have over 12,000 locations around the United States. It's free. They usually meet in churches, but that's not because they're coming from any specific theological back thing. They just, churches offer their buildings for free to this nonprofit organization that takes you through, I think, a 12 weeks, about 3 months program. It's very beneficial. And you can just go to griefshare.org, put in your zip code, and the closest one to you will pop up. And you can even if they're in the middle of a 3 month program, you can join at any time. But it's very helpful. And I've had many clients go to those meetings. It's very helpful while they're going through their grieving experience, whether it's the initial grief or you've been grieving for a while. It's just beneficial. So I
Oh,
always recommend that to people.
oh, that's awesome. And yeah, so Tara asked, "Hey, do I need therapy?" I think
Good question.
what I'm saying is you need questions answered, and ideally, you want those questions answered efficiently by
Hmm.
someone who's competent. And
Right.
so that's how I would answer that. It's up to you how you get those questions answered, and how you choose someone who's competent to help you in the process of answering those questions.
Mm-hmm.
And as my sister just mentioned, there are a multitude of resources to help you in that process of asking your questions, being aware of what questions you have, and then designing a process to get the questions answered, and then proceeding with that. But that'll be up to you how you choose to get those questions identified and then ultimately answered.
Right. I think Gregory's questions back up because he did clarify about this
Mhm.
when grief turns to sin, like drugs and alcohol. And I mean, when that happens, that's definitely not a good thing. If it's becoming a drug and alcohol addiction, that's still the person's still not really dealing with the grief. It's just a way to self medicate and to mask, those emotions that they're having.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the question, Gregory, and thank you for that. Thank you for that response, sis. What I would add to that is the calling of drugs and alcohol is they tend to be a short-term solution. They tend to
Right.
be like very, very short terms. And the problem is oftentimes they worsen it. Sometimes even in the short term, they worsen the situation, but certainly in the long term, they will worsen the situation. One of the interesting things I found in treating the addiction community in my clinical setting, I found that drugs and alcohol tended to interfere with effective processing of the grief.
Right.
So that it was finally when the person actually got off of the drugs and alcohol that they would have a grieving experience that was commensurate, that was
Mhm.
what you would expect with the grief way back. Well, they were experiencing it as if it was yesterday because basically the substances had basically paralyzed their ability to heal. And again, sometimes the pain, of course, is so bad you just don't want to encounter it, and so you put it off. But of course, all you're doing
Mhm.
is putting it off. And of course, with consuming substances, there's also that the negative, the deleterious impact on the body, and on your life, substance use
Mhm.
obviously can negatively impact the life as well. So
Right.
that when you can find a setting to actually confront the grief and be supported, so you don't have to do it by yourself, what you find is you're actually dealing with it and you're
Mhm.
actually moving towards healing.
Right.
So yeah, that's the downside to using drugs.
Mhm.
The payoff might be in the short terms. A lot of times it's not even there in the short term,
Right.
but it's quite a payment long term, quite a bit of sacrifice in the well-being of the person's life
Mhm.
when that short-term solution is chosen.
Yeah. We have a question that says, do some people hold on to grief? Or let's see, do some do some people hold on to grief mostly the death of a loved one because they are fearful of forgetting the person? Um, what what is wrong with this? So I think when you're grieving, definitely, I mean, the loss of a loved one, you are afraid that you might that is a fear that some have that they might forget them. And someone that you are dearly close to, you're never going to forget them. I mean, one of the ways instead of I mean, because we're saying people grieve, like I still feel like we have to clarify like what that means. Like, you still miss them, you're sad, but it's not again stopping, it's not affecting your life in a negative way. It's not preventing you from doing the healthy things and moving forward with your life. I mean, if it is, then it's, at another level. And that's when you need to, either join a grief support group or talk to a mental health professional, just so you can get your life, back on track. I know, and again, I keep going to my own self, maybe because I've experienced grief in the last year and a half, but I don't know what are the ways that, I mean, I'm able to our family, I should say, me and my children and my husband, we talk about my dad all the time, and we laugh at the things that he would always make us, the funny things he would do, and the great experiences. And I don't consider that a part of grieving. It's just a way of, keeping him close, to make him feel close. I mean, I do things. Um, my dad was an avid basketball lover. And he made me a basketball lover, but he was like, just loved basketball. So I have to say that I probably watched, I'm really telling my stuff now, but I got like the NBA package so that I could watch like as many games as possible, because that's how I felt. That's me and my dad would watch games together. He would call me during halftime, and this is what
What's
we
your
would do.
team, sis? What's your team?
Where am I from? The Warriors are my team, the Bay
Ah,
Area. There's
silly
nothing.
question. Silly
That's
question.
a silly question.
My apologies.
But it's not really because I'm from there. I just love those players. But anyways, that was
Yes,
my dad's favorite team too. But
uh,
so yeah, so I would feel closer to him when we would doing that, just because, or I would remember, I should say, the special times that we spent just talking about basketball and going to basketball games and those types of things. Really, any sport, but primarily basketball. So, I say that to say that keeping the person alive by doing special things that you guys used to do together, that's very healing. And there's nothing wrong with that as part of your healing process.
no, well said. And again,
Mhm.
condolences, because yeah, that's hard. We weren't made for loss. What I
Mhm.
want to say is the simple answer to the question is yes, there are people who are afraid to deal with their grief out of fear of forgetting the person. I've observed that clinically. Um,
Mhm.
Now that said, though, um, you can go through a process that reduces the pain, but still honors the memory, because
Mhm.
ultimately that's your goal.
Mhm.
Is something that minimizes the pain, but you're still honoring the memory. And here is my big take home for the evening. Here's my big take home. Um, the best antidote for grief is presence. Is presence the best antidote? The people in your community that you love, be present. Be present for them, because time with loved ones is not promised.
Right.
It's not promised. And if you end up, with your face buried in a phone when you're in the presence of these people, or you allow
Mhm.
yourself to be distracted by things,
Mhm.
what it does is it robs you of the memories. As you just heard my sis mentioned, part of what is nurturing her is the ongoing memories.
Mhm.
It is those memories that are the vehicle by which we internalize our loved ones. Those memories, long after the person is gone, their memory lives within us. It
Mhm.
lives within us. And they're there for us to cherish at our heart's content.
Right.
And as we cherish them, it's nurturing. It's nurturing.
Mhm.
As Adventists, we believe that there is a great getting up in the morning. Our
Right.
belief, we have the biblical belief that the dead know not
Nothing.
anything. They know not anything. And we believe though that it's almost like when people die, it's like they're waiting. They're waiting for God to resolve the great conflict, at which time all those that are saved will be gathered up for that great getting up morning. And
Mhm.
scripture also tells us that they'll be changed in the twinkling of an eye. They shall
Mhm.
all be changed. This mortal shall put on immortality. Well, with that mindset, we're further, and so it informs us that we will be reconnected with our loved ones. And so it's that belief that can sometimes have us not grieve like the world that might view the person is going to die forever, per se. No, we know they're sleeping. You would often hear Jesus say they're sleeping. Um,
Mhm.
but from a clinical standpoint, be present. Be present. Because when the person is gone, part of what will nurture you is your understanding that you were present for the interaction. Now, here is the key. Here is the key. Grief can tempt you to not be present.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Grief of a lost loved one can tempt you to not be present for the people who are
Are
alive.
alive. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It can tempt you. We
Mm-hmm.
are encouraging you to resist that temptation.
Mm-hmm.
Don't forget that there are still living, there are still experiences, there is still value that you can add to
Mm-hmm.
the living human experience. And the goal is that grief not necessarily distract you from that or have you forget your ongoing membership in humanity,
Right.
especially when there are living humans that you can
Mm-hmm.
still have an impact on, that you can still memorize, because it's still true that time with loved ones is not promised and you want to
Mm-hmm.
be there for it.
Right.
Because heaven forbid one was distracted by grief, so they weren't present for the loved ones that exist, and something happens to that loved one.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my goodness, I didn't even have the luxury. I didn't even take advantage of the opportunities to be present for them because I was distracted by this grief.
Right.
And that's why it's so important to go through the process of healing, but then also remembering that there are still people around us that we can still internalize, so
Mm-hmm.
that it helps us better cope with loss when we understand we were present for what we could be present for.
Right.
Put a
Right.
one in the chat if this makes sense, what I just said. Please put a one in the chat if that makes sense.
And while people are putting a one, I know we're talking about grief and it's such a serious topic, but I have like two friends, like childhood friends that are on here right now. They made me smile because I saw them. So I want to say hi to Amiel Sisk and Phaedra. These are two, like, I've known them since I was 14. So yeah.
Wow.
So I couldn't
Wow.
just let it go by.
No.
These are good friends, but good. You got a lot of ones. It's making sense. It's making
Awesome.
sense. Definitely making
Awesome.
sense. Um,
Thank you, Ethne. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Tyra. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, the Shiznut. Thank
yeah,
you, Evelyn.
yeah.
Hey, I
Evelyn.
can try to pronounce that.
Yes. Okay. Grieving my mom and husband. Can't eat or sleep well. Little focus. Should you take DBT or CBT? Um, and then this is it Diddy?
DD. Um,
Diddy. Okay.
yeah. DBT stands for dialectical behavioral therapy,
Therapy. Right.
and it's a form of therapy pioneered by Marsha Linehan. It really
Mhm.
actually targeted patients who were struggling with borderline personality disorder
Right.
and very, very severe mental illness that
Mhm.
often also involves self-harm behaviors.
Right.
Um, CBT stands for cognitive behavioral therapy, pioneered by Aaron Beck, and his daughter now is continuing his work, presuming she's still
Mhm.
working. And of course, it's based on this concept that your thoughts impact your mood, and your mood impacts your thoughts. And if you can correct some of the errors of your thinking, it can actually improve your
Improve your
mood.
behavior. Mhm.
So, in terms of grieving, I could see how a form of therapy might be helpful. I could see where CBT might play a more preeminent role, but what you find in mental health is it depends on the practitioner and the therapeutic alliance that is
Right.
established between, the client and the practitioner. So we are kind of warned against telling you go to a specific approach when in fact what you
Right.
really need is a competent, caring clinician that can get the job done. Um, so, um,
And I would
so
say look for someone who's specialized in grief therapy.
exactly.
Like look for somebody who specializes in that, and then you can move forward from there. If you connect with them and that alliance, you feel like that is a connection and a good mental health professional that will work for you. And then discuss just how they treat grief, and if you're comfortable with that, and move forward with that.
This question that is being featured right now by Jessica. Sister Atonte actually alluded to a number of times that, grief is not only death, it takes on many forms. Um, uh, so whether it's the grief from divorce, or the grief from tragedy, or the grief from maybe a job loss, the grief from maybe not achieving something. So there are many different ways that grief can manifest, and that's why I'm saying it's so worth getting some mental health support at times to do some sort of inventory of the things that are going on in your life to understand where grief may show up, so that it
Mhm.
doesn't hijack you. Can it also be the
Mhm.
absence of a parent? Yes. Growing up? Yes. Or a child you couldn't take care of because of a bad relationship? These all sound like possible sources of grief. Okay, those all sound like so our sister, um, definitely hoping for the best for you in what you might be going through.
Mhm.
It says, I'm looking at Christy, who said,
Okay.
my sister Kim suddenly died at the age of 52 and it shocked my family. We did not get the chance to say goodbye. We did not get the chance to say goodbye. Christy, sincerest
Yeah.
condolences to you. In situations like that, I often go through an exercise with my patients where I'll say, hey, when was the last time you spoke to that person? Do you remember what the last
Mhm.
time was that you spoke to them?
Mhm.
And I'll have them describe what it was and how it was that they spoke. And it is interesting to me how, in the moment, there's this perspective in which, in a sense, they did say goodbye in that moment. It's
Hmm.
very, very deep. I mean, it's very deep. As
Mhm.
you explore it and as you were interacting, what you find is a lot of times on reflection, the moment
Mhm.
was more significant than you first
Hmm.
noticed.
Hmm.
On
Mhm.
reflection, if you take the time to think about, the last time I spoke to the person, now that I think about it, this was significant.
Right.
And part of the significance can even be taking the time to think about it.
Right. Just building off what you had said earlier too, just you know, not taking for granted that you will see that loved one again, like when you depart, and always make sure that you say I love you, and tell them. I always say give people their flowers now, right? At my dad's service, we had so many amazing things to say about him, and I'm not saying we didn't say it to him when he was alive. He knew how much we loved him, but it's give them their flowers now. Tell them how you feel about them now. But just like you're saying, in the last moments, the last time you see somebody, you don't know that that's going to be the last time, but just letting them know, I love you. It was great to see you. Or, that could be you said goodbye. You know what I mean? You were able to, you didn't know that was the last time you were going to see them, but that was your goodbye. And it was a nice goodbye.
Goodbye. Um, I'll give my wife a hard time about this. Like, if I'm leaving out of the house, like,
Mhm.
I want the departure to be significant and to be taken significantly. And why? You don't know if
No.
this will be the last time you see me. You don't know if this will be the last time that you see me the way that I
Right.
am. I'm
Right.
about to go
True.
drive on the highway.
In
This is
LA or
California.
in Southern California. You're right.
In Southern California, no less,
Right. Mhm.
and you don't know. The next moment is not promised. So
Mhm.
I need to hug a little firmer, you know? And I need you to pause. I need this to be meaningful because
Yes.
this may be the last time you see me.
But
And
it's
so
true.
I
It's
don't
true.
do it out of sadness, but I do it out of, I want that if I didn't see you again, I treasured the last time that I saw you.
Right. Right.
So it's not in a sad and it's no. If I'm gonna hug you, I
Mhm.
want to hug you. I want to feel it. Let's pause. Let's take a moment. because the next moment is not promised.
Mm-hmm.
My mom was visiting with me for the past 2 weeks, and she headed back recently. When I'm hugging her, I'm like, I have to acknowledge this could be the last time I see you the way that
Mm.
you are, and so it needs to be meaningful.
Right.
And even as we like banter backwards and forwards, sometimes with your loved ones, you allow for like silly arguments where you're like,
Oh
why did I
man.
even do that? Why did I?
Right.
So, and it's so, even when I'm talking I'm like, I want our parting to be peaceful. I
Right.
don't have to argue with you about this, that, or the other. I don't have to have the last word.
Word.
No,
Yeah.
I need to honor the reality that this could be the last time I see you, and there is a degree of sacredness to that. So
Mm-hmm.
let's make this beautiful and meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
And I put that intention into it because I fully understand this could be the last time I see you.
Yeah. No,
Um,
it's very true. And wow, I know that grief, I mean, all of our topics bring, attention, and they're practical, and they're what people are going through, but definitely there was lots of comments and questions, and we just, we're at it's 8:03. So
oh,
we've
look at this.
uh,
Well, time flies.
it does. It
Time flies.
time flies. But we definitely, just again want to encourage you, if you are, grieving and going through an experience that you feel like you need a little bit more assistance and help, to definitely reach out. There's support groups in your area, to research the grief support groups. I mentioned Grief Share, and you can go to griefshare.org. They're all across America, very good grief support group. And then there's mental health therapists that specialize in grief therapy. And so, there's these resources are there for you, to assist you, to help you to be able to process your grief in a healthy way. So we just want to encourage everyone that needs that to go out and seek that, and to find that. We want to say that next week and moving forward, probably for several weeks, our topic is going to change. We're going to be talking about relationships, marriage relationship. And so we've been covering that in our Saturday on Sabbath school programs as well, but we're going to go into it here. And so we're looking forward to that. So come back, tell your friends that
This
we're,
this is one you don't want to miss. This is one
yes,
you do not want to miss. How do you apologize?
yes.
How do you resolve conflicts?
Yes.
How do you
How do you
argue
how do you
effectively?
prevent a conflict? I mean, there's
How do
ways,
you prevent a conflict? How
Yes,
Here's a juicy one though. How do you end it? How do you end it without making your partner feel dismissed? Is there a way to
right.
do that?
Yes.
So just a range of really, and plus your questions,
Yes.
so it's
So
going to make it really, really hot and helpful.
yes.
So be sure that your loved one come back, and we want you to have better, happier relationships.
Yes, we do. We want your
Um,
marriage to be happy, a happy one. So come back. We'll be here Monday, Mental Health Mondays at 7 p.m. Central. And you can check what time zone that is, all around what that means to where you live. But we're here every week. So we'll be moving forward with that topic of marriage. So tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers, share what we did today, because the replay people watch, we get hundreds and thousands of views after we air a program. And so again, if you know somebody who's struggling in the grief area, share this program so they can get some help, and maybe be able to get resources that can help them to go even further. So we thank you for watching, and you can join us. I mean, there's programs are all throughout the week. Tomorrow's True Health Tuesday with Dr. Kenesha Reynolds, and that's going to be a good one. She has a wealth of knowledge. There's prayer meeting. We have Dr. Pandit's Proving the Existence of God on Thursday. So there's all types of programming throughout the week. And so you don't want to miss that. And then on Sabbath, we're going to continue our discussion, Marriage Through the Sanctuary. You don't want to miss that. And a powerful sermon by the pastor. So you don't
Absolutely.
want to miss any of those things. That's all
Absolutely.
here on Living Manna Church. So we thank you for viewing. Thank you for your prayers and your support. And we just wish you guys a good evening and look forward to seeing you back here next Monday.
And we thank you for your financial support that
Yes.
makes, it possible for us to have this platform to deliver this kind of value to you. So please continue to provide support to the ministry, financial, prayer, and otherwise.
And that's right. And in the chat, there's you if you want to get updates. So like all that stuff that I mentioned, like all those programs and everything that Living Manna Church is doing, and you want to make sure you don't miss any of it. And you want to be updated. If you oh, it just went away. I mean, it didn't go away, but it was in the chat. Let's see, bring it down here. So you can let's see. Okay, yeah. Just text to let's see. Okay, there
You
it
just
is.
put it
I don't
there.
have to struggle here. 85763. That will sign you up so that you'll be getting all of our information and all the things that we're doing all throughout the week. And so you don't want to miss anything. You want alerts and all that type of stuff. You can get information that way. So text 85763. All right. Well, with that said, all of that said, you guys have a good evening. God bless you, and we will see you next week. Bye bye.
All the best. Bye
All
bye.
right. Bye bye.